Welcome to the Whole Language Classroom. I'm Linda Manjuris. Whole language is a concept, a set of beliefs or principles about how children learn that's becoming widely accepted in the Ontario educational system and worldwide. But applying the whole language principles in an elementary classroom is a difficult task for any teacher. So this series is going to take a look at how 4 ordinary teachers use whole language in their classrooms with extraordinary results. Each program in this series will visit a whole language classroom and then interview the teacher to find out practical ways of making whole language work. So in this program, we'll be taking a look at the beginning reader and writer, looking specifically at how to create an accepting atmosphere in that classroom, ways to link the elements of language, reading, writing, listening, and speaking, where literature fits in as a base for learning, different kinds of writing formats that children may choose, and the role for spelling and punctuation in this type of a program. So here's an introduction to today's whole language classroom.
Does Mark Brown spell his name the way our Mark spells his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. That's interesting. Let's see where Mark Brown is from. Oh, they don't tell us about him. Where do you think he's from? Stacy?
He lives in San Francisco.
San Francisco. Let's make up a family for him. Does he have a cat? Adam?
Yeah, and I know his name. Cheney Station.
Ooh, that's a good name for a cat. If there were a picture of Mark Brown, would he be smiling or not?
No.
Not smiling.
He doesn't like making stories.
For Tucker Elliott Brown, a winner in my book every day. Who do you think Tucker Elliott Brown is? Tony?
The dedicator.
That's who it's dedicated to. Just from the name, Tucker Elliott Brown.
Oh!
Michael?
His son.
Michael, when you dedicate a book, who do you dedicate it to, usually?
Some people in their class.
Oh, that would be a good
Or to the whole world.
Oh, that's a great stretch.
Joining me now is Andrew Bell, who will be talking to us about his strategies for teaching reading and writing today, and as well Val Taylor, who is the primary junior consultant with the York Region Board and has often worked together with Andrew. So welcome to the two of you for coming out today. That's your classroom. We got to see some of your children in your classroom. We got to hear you speak with them and get a sense of the kind of atmosphere that you've created in that classroom. I've been there. It's warm, it's welcoming, it's open. How do you create that type of an atmosphere?
Well, I don't create it. They do. The children do. I think that as a teacher, I'm more of a feedback device in the classroom. From the first day that the class is assembled, I start to get a feel for the kinds of people I have in the room. And I think that it's by listening to them and by going with their suggestions that the classroom is eventually created. And the one we end up with is not one that I would end up with next year or the year after that.
So listening is a really important skill.
Very important for the teacher.
Okay, and everything that you say and do comes from what the children,
That's
how
right.
they respond?
I don't think they really know that. I think they sense it. But they have a feeling that what they say and do is accepted, and that I'll follow through with that.
And so do you find then, as the year progresses, that children who may be reluctant in taking part in conversations or writing or reading feel more confident about doing that in that kind of an atmosphere?
They open up as the year goes along. The transitions are interesting, and the children who make the most progress are the ones that you feel the best about, because you've really drawn them out of themselves, and that's what education is about.
Okay, now Val, is that the type of atmosphere then that you need to run a good whole language program?
I think it's really one of the hardest things about whole language is being able to articulate how it actually works. Andrew has something that he hasn't mentioned that I'm aware of because I've been fortunate enough to spend time in the classroom, and it's called intuition. He responds to what he sees and hears happening in the classroom almost on an intuitive basis. He doesn't need to go and read a book about it. He doesn't have to go to curriculum and see if he's doing the right thing. I think some of us come to the job with intuition. I think some of us develop it as we stay in the job.
Well, I was going to say, because we're, you know, the Ministry of Education is trying to tell teachers this is the way to teach, and yet is every teacher suited? Is this the style for everybody?
That's a really, really good question. I don't know if there's an answer to that one. I do know that a teacher has to feel good, has to feel happy, has to feel satisfied about what's going on in the classroom. Andrew runs a very special classroom with young children. Another person could go in there, have the same ingredients to that program, but not necessarily get the same results. He also works from a premise of respect. He respects those 5- and 6-year-old children. They don't have to earn his respect. They get it.
Was this a grade level that you chose to teach?
Actually, I'd always envisioned myself teaching junior grade. And now that I've taught grade 1, I never want to leave it.
Yeah.
The kids, they bring things to that classroom. It's true to say that I take more away from it than they do.
Well, why don't we take a look to see what they do in this classroom, get a better feel of particularly the reading and writing opportunities that you give them. We'll watch the next roll-in and then talk about it afterwards, okay?
Yeah, I'll do it. What's a pond?
How did you make that sound like a question?
Because I saw the question mark.
Right. I like the way you read that.
It's the second Billy Goat Gruff. I'm going up to the hillside to make myself fat, said the Billy Goat.
I'm very proud of Arthur, he said. In fact, I'm proud of my whole class. They worked very hard. This is the last 3rd grade I'll have in the spellathon. But next year, I look forward to a new challenge. Teaching kindergarten.
How would you feel if you were going to enter a spellathon? How would you feel, Florence?
I don't feel embarrassed.
Do you think spellathons are a good idea?
No. Yeah.
Michael?
When you do it, you have to guess how to spell the word. And if you don't get it correct, you don't win anything, kind of.
Thanks, Michael. Aviv, what do you think about spellathons?
Well, what's good about them is if the teachers make them for the school, it just makes the kids study more and be smarter.
So you think they're a good idea?
Yeah.
If you were a teacher, just close your eyes for a minute and imagine. Your first day of school at Rosedale Heights, and you have a grade 1 class. What activities would you plan for your class? Adam.
Pets.
What would you like about having pets in the classroom, Adam?
To rip everything off.
Tony?
I would have, like, at the fun fair, you know, that fish tank with the fishing rods, that. That's what we need. My nose is down.
So they sent me, it was too jumpy. I sent it back.
Right. Is that word it or another word? He. Right. That's good, Robert. Great.
So they
Robert, if you need help from Michael, you nudge him on the arm.
Cook. Thought very hard and sent me. He was perfect. I kept him.
Wonderful, Robert. Thank you. Michael?
If I was a grade 1 teacher, I would tell everyone to run around the school 200 times.
Oh, my goodness. Why would you do that, Michael?
So at the end of the day, they'll be so tired and they won't want to come back ever.
What a great idea. I think I'm going to run this class around the school, maybe twice. You think that would tire you out?
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll be tired out before we're even around.
Can you tell me about your picture?
Sure. You see, on this page, they're so hot that they're jumping into the pool. And on this page, everyone's ready to come out.
There's a lot to talk about in that video, but why don't we start, first of all, with the reading opportunities. Library is a big part for your children, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. The trek to the library every day is one of the most popular parts of the day. We enter the library, which is a large room, and fan out into all of the corners. Competition for the stuffed chairs is intense, and I find that the children naturally group themselves into 2s and 3s, and some of them prefer to read alone. I find with that activity that I could let that go on all day if I wanted.
They'd be reading all day if they could.
Yeah, I have to stop it.
But then they get to read again back in the classroom.
They do,
And
yes.
they can read together, or you're reading to them. So we see them reading by themselves with each other. You're reading to them. I mean, this is a common way of teaching reading in whole language. How do children learn to read this way, Val?
I think we can't forget, when we look at what the children have achieved in Andrew's class, we can't forget that there's been a whole bunch of groundwork done there by parents before the children do come. Many of those children come from homes where parents have made a commitment
And have been
to
reading
read
to
to
them.
their children.
But what about the children who haven't come with that background?
Then you're looking at children at different stages of development within the same classroom. They're no less bright. They may just have not had the same experiences. So what makes Andrew's job really skilled, and as he said, grade 1 becomes addictive, is because you have this huge range within a classroom, and Andrew's craft or art is meeting all those needs as they come up. What may appear in language may not appear in mathematics.
Right.
So it's very much a balancing act.
And individual
Yes.
for each of the children
Yes.
involved there. Do you teach phonetically as well as, reading to them so they get to see the words and understand the language?
I use everything but the kitchen sink.
Okay.
Any method or technique that works with a child is good for
Okay.
them.
That's interesting to know, that it all holds true as long as it's right for that child. And that's really what whole language is saying,
It's
isn't it?
child-centered.
It's child-centered. Okay. Let's talk about the writing. There's obviously lots of writing happening in your classroom, and certainly a lot was spurned by the reading experiences, and we saw that happening. We have 2 examples of writing that your children did after your reading about the teacher. And it was, what would you do if you were a grade 1 teacher? And we just saw this boy reading to you his story. And now we have a girl's writing here that looks very different in format, word form. Obviously, the sentence structure is a little bit better. And so this, I think, stresses even more the wide range of skills you have, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Levels in your class.
I try to give each child an opportunity to start with they're ready. And I have all sorts of materials and paper. Some of them will make a book in 40 minutes, and others will work on a blank sheet and draw a picture with a few words. But it's very important to let them do what they're ready to do.
And you provide a lot of materials for them to work with. You have different kinds of papers, and you have a little rack to put them all in, and some are making booklets out of the papers.
Yeah, I scour the countryside looking for materials. The children choose a lot of the materials that they use themselves, and I'll keep putting them out until they're not interested in them anymore. One thing they're always interested in is the staples, though. And, the investment in that area is always very large.
They go through a lot of staples, do they? Okay, this is an interesting book. Now, we talk about the influence that literature has on children, and obviously making a book came from being familiar with books. Could you tell us about this book?
Well, that book came from home. It came in one piece, just like that. If you look closely at it, it contains everything that a book in a library contains. In
I
fact,
love the description of the authors back
yeah,
here. This is great.
everything in detail. If you wanted to look at that in a particular way, from a teacher's standpoint, you could call that a summative evaluation of bookmaking, book skills, aspects of a book. It constitutes a test, in other words.
And it's all there.
Spontaneous.
And this came from home, which meant what this child was learning in your classroom is making it as a big influence on his life.
Yeah, and hopefully his home life will have an influence on what he does in the class, and that there's an interplay.
So parents, again, as you were saying before, Val, they have a big role to play. But books are also made in classrooms as well. So we have this other book that came out of the class. This is a little flip book. What do you call these?
Flap.
Flat book?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have What's Under the Chair, and what is under the chair? A fish is under the chair, and it continues on through that pattern. Is this a pattern book, Val?
It could be, yes. I tend to think they read a lot of the spot books where the kids can open flaps and see things. So obviously this child's enjoyed it so much that he's decided to do it himself.
To do that himself.
Yeah.
And that wasn't something that you initiated, was it?
Not at all. That's spontaneous. I wouldn't think of asking them to do that because it would be too much work for the time allotted. But they get it done because they're interested in it.
Because it's something they're interested in. Okay, now journals is an issue. I mean, some teachers feel journals are a good thing and others feel they're not such a great thing. But I was impressed on how responsive your kids seem to be in journals. We've got a couple of pages as an example here. This child wrote, Mr. Bell, I do racing. I'm in the class and I'm getting faster. And then what'd you write there?
I think that you will be very fast, Saul.
And so he responds back, I think I will. And again, on another day, he drew a maze for you and had you do the maze. And you asked him, how did I do, Saul? And he said, you did it wrong. So you respond to your kids all the time in their journals, do you?
That's the purpose. It's conversation. And if we're having conversation and you say, yesterday I fell down and hurt myself, and I said, that was wonderfully sad. How do you feel?
What does that mean?
It's absurd. So it's a conversation. I don't comment on the style of their writing, how they've written. It's what they've written. It's between the student and me, and it's private.
And it's personal. Is this is an effective technique to use, Val?
I think when teachers work with journals, the one thing that will guarantee success is the validity of the response. Years ago, we had children write journals, and we responded with, well done, John.
And what does,
nice
again,
work,
what does that mean?
Sarah.
Yes, yeah.
Purely in the mechanics, if you like, of the writing. And we've learned that, in fact, that doesn't do anything for children. The real response comes from the heart. And Andrew's faith in Saul, that he could be faster than he is right now.
Proves meaningful for him, and he
yeah.
probably will become faster.
I think so.
Now, the forms of writing that really amuse me, and to me, this shows the real success of your program, is the fact that they start communicating outside of class. They started writing notes, and we've got that too to take a look at. They started writing notes to you to get more reading cards and have glue sticks, so that was communicating with you. And then one child decided to write a love note to another child. I love you, please marry you. And then they go beyond that and write to the custodian that there's bubble gum that needs to be cleaned up. I mean, that says a lot.
Again, that's spontaneous. They have to write these notes because I have such a rotten memory. They started sticking them up with masking tape on the pillar beside the window, and it just started to become a gathering spot for notes. This way, they see that things can get done through their words, that writing doesn't just have a literary purpose, that writing can lead to action, it can get in things, it can do the same things that speaking can, but in another way.
But isn't that really the ultimate? I mean, that's wonderful if you can get your children to that point, that writing isn't an exercise, there's a purpose to it.
Yeah, that shows me that they get the point about writing, that they're starting to use it in new ways.
And in a purposeful way, in ways that they'll use for the rest of their lives, too. Well, one of the things that we haven't talked about here that I think we need to deal with is the issue of spelling and punctuation. You know, in the media, we hear all the time our children can't spell, and the whole language is going to be the ruination of us all because you don't teach spelling. So why don't we take a look and see how one of the ways that you approach spelling in your classroom, and then we'll come back and talk about that issue.
What makes the clouds
High.
What makes the clouds high? Let's start with what? Mark.
I could do everything.
Okay, Mark. Let's do it.
W-H-A-T.
Great. Makes?
Makes M-A-K-E-S.
Wow. Keep going.
What was the question?
What makes the clouds high?
What makes T-H-E.
Good. Clouds.
High. H-I.
H-I. And that makes the sound high, doesn't it? But there are a couple of extra letters in high that I'm going to add on. You tell me if these make any sense to you. G and H.
No.
Do you hear those sounds?
No.
So if we just left it H-I, you'd hear the sound high, wouldn't you? Why do we add those extra letters? Jordan?
Because they're different words. High spells H-I-G-H, like high up there, and like high waving spells H-I.
That's right. Good for you, Jordan. What do we put on the end of this sentence? Mark?
Question mark.
A question mark. Right.
Is this Charles? See, I'm just putting Charles is Charles. Why 2 E's? 2 E's? This is an L. I? Yeah. For Charles? Charlie. Oh. And I'm teacher. Teacher? I know it's R-O-S-E. Dale is D-A-L. And honey's Hubner.
You got every letter but one, Saul.
Yes.
What letter? Right. Why do you think it's an E?
Rosedale Heights.
Do we hear the E?
No. It's a silent letter.
Silent letter. That's right, Aisha.
Mr. Bell,
Good for you.
I don't spell Mr. Bell. Good Barbie. Can
That's great.
Dale.
New.
Dale. There's an E at the
Hard
end.
to tell because
I
the
know it.
sound is different.
What? Look. Rosedale.
Sounds like a U, doesn't it? New. But it's not. It's
D-A-L-E.
another vowel.
Yeah, you've written on the board, they've spelled out words for you, you pointed out places where the English language just doesn't make sense. There's spelling happening in your classroom. Tell me about how this works in your class.
Well, this is the unromantic part about writing. It's the nuts and bolts. It's unglamorous, and there's a place for it, but I think the place is during writing. We load spelling on the front end of the day, so that we're thinking about spelling while we write for the rest
Throughout
of
the day. So those shots where we saw of the children writing, that happened later on in the day, and they
That's
were still
right.
thinking about it as they went through.
Yeah. To learn how to spell a word when you need it, that's much more valuable than memorizing a word to be written on a test later on in the week. There's no point for that.
Well, and the Rosedale Heights School was very important for those two boys, and in fact we have an example of his writing right after that, where we see Rosedale Heights Public School being spelled. You can see he's still, missing some of the letters, but obviously that was important to him. He's written it down. That's going to stay somewhere, and there was a use here for it.
Because he had a need for it at the time.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't an arbitrary choice that I made or a textbook author made in some other place.
Val, what do you think about teaching of spelling and punctuation in whole language class?
Well, I think that may be one of the things that has been most misunderstood when we talk about whole language, or when the people in the community talk about whole language. Whole language teachers teach spelling. They teach spelling every day. In fact, they teach it more than once a day, not just for 5 or 10 minutes a day, but when it's needed, when the children need it. And whole language teachers make connections for children. For instance, the silent E that Andrew was talking about, that in fact the child called a silent E, comes at the end of the word. Then the next step from that is, do we know any other words where the silent E is at the end of the word?
So you find the patterning then.
Yes, and I know Andrew does this with the students in his class.
And then later on down the grades, would it be then identifying that that makes an effect on a vowel, and that'll come further down?
Absolutely.
So you're just building up the steps
Yes,
as you go along.
it's spelling is taught, but not through 10 or 15 minutes of meaningless words that have no authenticity for the children.
Well, I'm fascinated about how child-centered and how independent it is to every child, whole language. It's really interesting to see, and your classroom was a perfect example to see. So thank you very much, both of you, Andrew and Val, for coming and talking about beginning readers and writers. If you'd like to find out more about whole language, then be sure to watch the rest of the programs in this series, featuring 3 other whole language teachers in action, as well as a special 1-hour show in which parents and teachers can pose questions about whole language to a teacher, a principal, a consultant, and a faculty of education professor. That's all on the Whole Language Classroom.